Hello, parents. Welcome to another episode of the Parent Guide podcast. I am your host, Matt Bulkley, licensed psychotherapist, and week after week, I sit in my counseling office with parents, with moms, dads, teen boys who are fighting an invisible war. And parents, if you're tuning in today because you have discovered that your teen son is struggling with pornography, I want to reassure you that you're in the right place. And I know your heart is hurting. I know that you've probably experienced the tears, the heavy silence, the secrecy, or the paralyzing shame that wraps itself around your home when this issue comes to light. And I know that you might have heard your teen say something that terrified you. Words like, hey, mom, or hey, dad, I feel trapped, I feel addicted, I can't stop. And yet, when you look at the technical details, maybe they're not watching it every single day. Maybe it's once a week or a couple of times a month. And you find yourself confused. You're thinking, well, is it really an addiction if it's not happening constantly? And if so, why are they in so much agonizing pain about this? Well, here's the central paradox that two teenagers can watch the exact same amount of pornography. One feels a mild pang of guilt and then moves on with their day, while the other spirals into severe emotional distress, maybe locks themselves in their room and believes that their entire moral identity is shattered. Well, why is that? Today, we are going to unpack a groundbreaking psychological discovery that answers that exact question. And this is fresh data from the last 2 years, studies from 2020, 2025 and 2026 that have really completely changed how we as clinicians view teen pornography struggles. And we're going to dive deep into what clinical researchers call moral incongruence. And especially if you have a faith-based, traditional, or highly value-driven family, this concept is the missing puzzle piece that you've been looking for. It explains why your teen feels completely addicted, even if the behavior itself isn't really that bad by secular standards or on a continuum. So stick with me, and if you're driving, settle in. And this episode it's not about condemning your teen at all. It's about understanding their brain, the neuroscience, protecting their heart, and giving you as a parent a practical roadmap to bring them back into the light. So stick with me. I hope this will be something that will help you to get to that turning point with your family. Well, parents, let's start right at the foundation of the issue here. As parents, we think about addiction. When we think about addiction, we usually look at the quantity of the behavior. So in other words, for example, if we're thinking about alcoholism in terms of maybe how many drinks someone has per day, or substance use issue is, well, how often are they using that drug? And naturally, we apply that same logic to pornography. We think, well, my teen is emotional and crying and saying that they're addicted. Well, they must be watching this every day for hours. But clinical practice and recent research tells us really a pretty different story. And to understand what's actually happening inside your teen son's mind, we have to look at a vital psychological phenomenon known as moral incongruence. And so defining this concept, by definition, moral incongruence occurs when a person's actual behavior directly, violently conflicts with their deeply held moral, ethical, or religious values. So it is the psychological state of living an internal civil war. The teenager's mind is split cleanly in two. So one part says this behavior is profoundly wrong, it violates my faith, it damages my soul, while another part, often driven by natural teen curiosity, that dopamine seeking behavior, or sometimes emotional coping, engages in the behavior anyway. And this creates an intense burning friction called cognitive dissonance, which rapidly morphs into severe shame. And the conflict generates overwhelming anxiety or deep self-loathing and a pervasive sense of powerlessness or helplessness. And it is precisely this emotional agony that creates that intense feeling of perceived addiction. So for a long time, this was just a theory that maybe faith-based therapists observed in office settings. But over the last 2 years, the scientific community has really caught up to this concept in a in a massive way. A 2026 global investigation just this last year, landmark global study published in the journal Behavioral Addictions evaluated data from tens of thousands of individuals across multiple continents, diverse cultures, varied religious traditions. And the researchers set out really to map the relationship between how much porn people watch, what they believed about it, and whether they felt addicted. And the core finding was actually pretty staggering. The study confirmed that moral disapproval is a significantly stronger predictor of feeling addicted than the actual volume of pornography consumed. So let me say that again because it changes everything. Really, it's not the number of clicks or videos that primarily drives the feeling of being trapped. It is the degree of the moral clash. The data proved that moral incongruence acts as a powerful moderator, artificially amplifying the distress levels of moderate users. So the foundation here, this builds perfectly on earlier work that was done by Dr. Joshua Grubbs and his colleagues. For years, he studied what we call the religiosity gap. His research consistently demonstrated that individuals from highly religious or value-driven backgrounds report the highest levels of addiction symptoms, even when objective data showed that they use pornography far less than their secular peers. And a major clinical review finalized in 2025 synthesized a decade's worth of this data, cementing moral incongruence as a central diagnostic pillar in behavioral psychology. Well, let's talk about the real world implications of this for religious families. So if you're a faith-driven parent, I want you to hear me clearly on this. Your teens distress, it's not made up. I don't want to be misunderstood here. It's not teens distress is not made up. They're not exaggerating when they're emotional, when they're crying, when they're feeling shame, when they say that they feel hooked. Their conscience is experiencing genuine trauma because they're violating their own code of honor. Well, and as a psychotherapist, I see this manifest really as a tragic paradox because the very fact that your teen has a vibrant, highly developed conscience means that even a minor slip up feels like a catastrophic moral failure. They don't just think, well, I made a bad choice. They internalize it and sometimes conclude, well, I'm really a bad, broken person, and I keep making this mistake over and over. I can't change. And when we understand this, our entire parenting strategy has to shift. If we approach a morally incongruent teen boy with heavy-handed lectures on why porn is bad, we're completely misdiagnosing the situation here. They already know that it's bad. In fact, their acute awareness of its wrongness is exactly what's actually tearing them apart. Well, so let's shift a bit here to what I would call the hidden costs. That this would be secrecy, deception, dishonesty. And now that we understand the psychological architecture of moral incongruence, we have to look at it, really its most destructive byproduct. And it isn't just the internal shame that harms a teen, it's the relational poison that follows. So when a teen boy experiences this profound values clash, it triggers survival mechanism characterized by secrecy, deception, and persistent dishonesty. And so let's look at how this progresses, these defensive behaviors. And I want to speak directly to really a heartbreaking dynamic that I hear from parents almost every week. A mom or a dad will sit in my office on my couch, tears welling up in their eyes, and say something like, well, Matt, my son was always the sweetest, most honest boy. He never lied to me. But over the last few months, I catch him in these bizarre small lies. He's hiding his phone. He deletes browser history obsessively. And when I ask him what's wrong, he snaps at me or completely shuts down, won't talk. And who is this kid? I feel like I don't even know my own son anymore. Well, parents, if that resonates with you, please understand this. Your teen, they haven't just suddenly transformed into a malicious, deceptive person. They're actually underneath that. They're a terrified kid trying to protect themselves from the crushing weight of exposure. So when this moral incongruence takes hold, the progression of secrecy follows a predictable, painful pattern. So and it looks like this. So first would be digital erasure. So it begins with minor cover-ups. They compulsively clear the search history. They maybe switch to incognito mode, or they use encrypted messaging apps, and then it would move to physical isolation, where they begin sneaking devices into their bedroom late at night, or they sit with their backs firmly against the wall so no one can see their screen. They isolate in their room for hours, avoiding family dinner or movie nights because looking you in the eye feels like an indictment. And then progression moves to what I would call the fabrication matrix. To protect the secret, they have to start creating maybe fake social media accounts or secondary profiles, and new accounts that you have no idea even exist. And when you ask a simple question like, "Well, what were you doing upstairs?" Their brain panics. They fabricate a minor lie to cover their tracks, which kind of leads to the question, well, why do good kids turn to dishonesty? And I think it is critical to recognize that this dishonesty, it does not spring from a lack of character. It is really an anxious, desperate reaction to shame. Think about the psychological math that's running through your teen's mind with this. So it's like exposure equals the ultimate loss of value. So they believe that if you or their religious community or their friends find out about their struggle, they will be utterly cast out. They believe that they will lose your love, their standing, or be branded a hypocrite or a pervert forever. So in other words, like the internalized shame leads to the fear of exposure or rejection, which then leads to defensiveness, the lying and the secrecy, which then leads to deepened isolation. Therefore, the lying, the dishonesty becomes an act of psychological self-defense. But here is the tragedy of the cycle. The secrecy becomes its own addiction layer. Every single time that your teen tells a lie to cover up their porn use, they feel a fresh wave of intense moral guilt for being a liar. And this new layer of shame compounds the original shame of the pornography. And now they feel trapped in a double bind. They are failing sexually and they are failing relationally. And to numb out the agonizing anxiety of this double failure, what do? Well, they turn right back to the very substance that offers temporary dopamine-driven relief, and that is the pornography. And this is the loop that breaks the family trust. It erodes communication, it damages the parent-child attachments, and it deepens the addiction cycle. And if we don't intervene with a precise understanding of this concept of moral incongruence, standard disciplinary measures like taking away the phone or grounding them a lot of times will backfire, which then drives the secrecy even deeper underground. As parents, we can best support the recovery rather than dwelling on all of this negativity. So how do we break the loop? How do we step into this painful cycle and guide our teen sons out of the trap of moral incongruence and into lasting freedom? Well, fortunately, because we understand the root cause, we don't have to rely on guesswork here. We can deploy structured and evidence-based tools and relational strategies that treat the whole person, including the brain chemistry, the emotional coping mechanisms, and even the moral values. So let's go through this here and give it to you step by step, actionable step by step guidance for supporting real recovery at home. So number one, let's call it this: to create radical safety. Radical safety, not shame. The very first step belongs to you, the parent. We must consciously create an environment of profound relational safety because shame is the primary fuel of the moral incongruence cycle. Adding parental anger, disgust, or condemnation to the mix, it only accelerates the downward spiral. When you address this issue, your tone, it must bridge the gap between grace and clear accountability. So you want to validate their internal conflict rather than minimizing it. So try using language something like this, something to the effect of, hey buddy, I see how much pain you're in and I see how hard that you've been fighting this internal battle, and I want you to look at me. You are not a bad kid. You are a great kid with a strong conscience who's caught in a tough habit. Your distress actually tells me that your heart is still incredibly good, and I want you to live a life of integrity. And I'm not here to judge you, to punish you, or to cast you out in any way. I'm here to stand in the trenches with you, and we're going to figure out how to align your daily actions back with your beautiful values. And so parents, by framing their distress as evidence of their good conscience, you instantly dismantle the lie that they are uniquely broken. You transform the conversation from a trial into a collaborative rescue mission. Number 2 would be to implement evidence-based tools at home, and compassion is the foundation, but structure is the framework. And to give your teen tangible traction, I highly recommend using structured professional materials designed specifically for family-guided outpatient recovery. And the premier resource that I recommend to families, my practice, is the Recovery Toolbox for Teens. And this isn't just a book of generic advice. It is a highly tactical, clinical set of workbooks and resources built for the modern digital landscape. So within this trio of workbooks, you're going to find pre-treatment questionnaires, which features specialized questionnaires that help you and your teen to objectively identify their specific emotional triggers, whether they're turning to screens out of boredom or academic anxiety or social isolation. Includes numerous practical exercises and relapse trackers. It provides cognitive behavioral tools that help them pause when the urge hits, to map out their patterns and celebrate increments of clean time without crashing into despair if relapses do occur. One of the workbooks is the Parent Guide, which gives you as a parent concrete communication scripts to help rebuild the trust step by step. It provides a clear, predictable roadmap, so you don't have to wake up every morning wondering if you're handling this correctly. And the Parent Guide goes right along with the Breaking Free workbook. So as your teen is learning a particular concept, that you yourself are getting the parent version of that. All right, next, number 3 would be to monitor and set boundaries lovingly. So we must also manage the environment. A brain that's caught up in a compulsive loop, it does need external scaffolding while it heals, and this means that it means setting intelligent boundaries, but doing so with their involvement rather than as essentially a hostile surveillance state. So this would be things like collaborative monitoring. So you would sit down together and install high quality device monitoring software, and you'd frame it not as an act of distrust, but really as a protective shield. So you're going to say something to the effect of, well, let's put this boundary in place so that your brain can rest and heal, and that you don't have to expend all of your willpower fighting temptation every time you look at the screen. Things like screen-free ecosystems. So establishing absolute family media rules. So things like no smartphones or tablets or computers allowed in bedrooms overnight. Bottom line, period. Something to the effect that all devices plug into a central charging station in the kitchen by 9:00, and that you stick to that, and that you live by that yourself. Things like connection over control. So always remember that rules without relationship lead to rebellion. So ensure that your boundaries are balanced by intentional device-free family connection time, and get out, do things like hiking or cooking together, regular one-on-one parent dates. And then number 4 would be to address the deeper undercurrents. And here's the thing, and pornography is rarely just about sex. For most teen boys, it operates as a chemical coping mechanism that's used to numb out real-life discomfort. It's an emotional anesthetic for things like loneliness or social rejection or feelings of ineptness or learning differences or low self-esteem or depression or anxiety. And to achieve permanent recovery, we have to help them develop emotional regulation skills, teach them how to identify and name their feelings, and how to process disappointment without a screen, how to build authentic, messy, real-life relationships. I think for a lot of the teen boys that I've worked with, their ability to identify and recognize emotions and express emotions is highly underdeveloped. And so this becomes a vital area of growth that allows them to get past using pornography as a maladaptive coping mechanism. Well, parents, let's talk for just a little bit here about understanding the threshold for when intensive intervention would be needed. So here's the thing. I want to pause and recognize and just speak with real candor to parents who are dealing with more severe, complex, or high-risk situations. So sometimes, despite your best efforts at home, or when outpatient therapy or home tools are not enough, or if your teen's secrecy is extreme, if their porn use has evolved into highly compulsive or risky behaviors, or if their grades are tanking, or if they're completely withdrawing from friends, or if they're battling co-occurring issues like severe depression or clinical anxiety or underlying trauma, then you do need to evaluate the level of clinical support. So here's the thing. So when it's, I would describe the matrix as this. So if the level of struggle, if it's moderate or if it's value conflicted, and some of the key indicators there would be occasional usage or a high guilt level, or and they're able to maintain school or social life, and they're open to some dialogue, then definitely I think the recommended intervention strategy would be recovery toolbox for teens and maybe weekly outpatient therapy with a clinician, along with some of the home boundaries and tech monitoring that we talked about. But if the level of struggle seems to have moved into a more severe or deeply compulsive level, with key indicators being things like nightly usage, profound deception and dishonesty and sneakiness, failing grades, total social isolation, severe anxiety or depression, or sexual acting out, or risky online behaviors, then the recommended intervention strategy is probably going to be something more like our STAR Guides wilderness therapy program, an intensive specialized intervention, a digital detox of sorts, a complete reset. So, and STAR Guides is for adolescent boys age 13, 17 that are stuck in these deep self-destructive loops. STAR Guides is an option that delivers a profound, life-altering, literally life-changing experience. STAR Guides is highly specialized wilderness program that focuses specifically on adolescent compulsive sexual behaviors, digital addictions, pornography struggles. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Teen is clearly removed from the toxic, hyper-connected digital ecosystem and then immersed into a therapeutic wilderness environment. And this is where this is literally the ultimate digital reset. Out in nature, constant digital noise and dopamine hits stop completely. And this allows the nervous system and the dopamine systems to regulate and recalibrate and heal. And the therapeutic approach uses a trauma-informed therapy where teens are engaged in a rigorous individual, group, and family therapy curriculum designed to unearth the root trauma, anxiety, or attachment wounds that tend to drive those compulsive behaviors. And as far as values realignment, STAR Guides operates with deep respect for the recovery process, focus on helping young men rediscover their core values. They learn accountability, build genuine resilience and emotional coping, and then craft a concrete, actionable relapse prevention plan to bring back home. So parents, if you're at your wit's end and feel like you are literally losing your son to this darkness, then STAR Guides offers an intentional, compassionate, expert intervention to interrupt the cycle and restore your child to their true self. Well, parents, as we bring today's conversation to a close, I do want to leave you with a profound sense of hope. If you've discovered that your teen is trapped in this cycle of moral incongruence or shame, secrecy, please hear me. You have not failed as a parent, and your teen is not a lost cause. Think about the beautiful silver lining of this entire psychological discovery of this moral congruence. Your teen's intense distress, their tears, and even their anxiety that they feel are proof positive that their conscience is alive and well. Their heart has not hardened. They want to be good. They want to live in integrity. That strong moral compass, which is currently causing them so much discomfort, is the exact foundation upon which we're going to build their recovery. Their values are not gone. They're just waiting for us to help align their behavior back to them. So parents, don't let the information from this episode slip away. Take one small intentional step today. Maybe educate yourself further. Look into the description in the show notes below, and I've provided direct links to the recovery toolbox for teens, so you can tap into this structured recovery roadmap into your home right away. I would challenge you to evaluate the clinical needs. If you recognize that your teen's situation is complex or escalating, then in the show notes you'll find links to the STAR Guides Wilderness Therapy Program. Remember, knowledge is power, and knowing your options is going to give you peace of mind. And make sure to join our community. If the podcast brought you some clarity today, hit the subscribe button, share the episode with a friend or a pastor or another parent who may need this information. And I'd love to hear from you. Drop me an email. Let me know, what have you noticed? Have you noticed any specific value conflict or sudden secrecy your teen? What's a step that you'll feel inspired to take this week to build a bridge of safety for your teen son? Parents, thank you for trusting me with your family's journey today. I know you love your teen and you're fighting for them, and they are worthy of every single bit of the fight. I'm Matt Bulkley. Take care. Take care of your family. Take care of your son. I will see you right here on the next episode of The Parent Guide.